The soldier's heart was failing, not in a metaphor, not from grief. His pulse was a drumbeat sliding into silence. One EKG lead peeled off, glue slick and useless as the monitor flatlined. Again. Fourth code blue in 2 hours. Dr. Martin cursed, loud. He pressed hard on the man's sternum with gloved palms, sweat beading at his temples.
Where's respiratory?
They were already there, but no one was helping. She was. Standing at the edge of the chaos, her blue nitrile gloves blood, misted, hair pulled tight in a no-nonsense bun, Dr. Aveline Trask whispered something to herself, quiet, low, almost a hum. Her left hand twitched once, unconsciously rubbing her thumb over the stitched edge of her scrub-top side seam. A habit from another life, one she never spoke of here. The soldier on the table had a name, Captain Elias Brenner, 33. Ranger. Afghanistan tour cut short 6 weeks ago with unexplained seizures, cardiac arrhythmias, and night sweats no one could trace. Every test said he was fine. Every note in his chart said somatoform possibility. In careful, coded language, psychogenic, in his head. Aveline had written a single sentence in her consult note. It had been ignored. Now his lungs were stiffening. The code team moved without rhythm. 3 nurses, 2 interns, 1 lead. But their eyes kept darting toward the clock. They weren't saying it, but they'd already started letting go. He's cooked. One whispered too close to the curtain. Aveline stepped forward. He's not. But Dr. Martin shot her a look. Not of disagreement, of warning. Not your room. Not your voice. She stopped. Hands clenched, breath held, because Aveline knew, not suspected, knew what was killing him. 6 hours earlier, she'd been assigned back to back consults, one of them Brenner. His tremor, his pupils, his intermittent hypoxia, they matched a rare neurotoxin. One she'd encountered a decade ago at Kandahar, buried in a cluster of forgotten cases never filed properly stateside. An organophosphate variant, military exposure only, untraceable in standard tox panels. She'd submitted a formal flag, used the exact terms, OPV-27 suspected. Request neurotoxicologist approval and field sample clearance. No response. It had been auto-closed. She had resubmitted. Again, ignored. Because Trask wasn't the kind of doctor anyone listened to. She wasn't flashy. She didn't market. She wasn't a star in grand rounds. She didn't network with hospital brass. But more than that, her file still carried the stain. A 2-year leave of absence, unexplained in HR systems. Unofficial whispers said, nervous breakdown. The truth was more precise and more damning to those who'd caused it. But she'd never corrected the record. She'd let silence be her shield. Now she watched a man's body try to die in front of her. His heart stuttered back into rhythm. Weak, faint, but back. Dr. Martin exhaled. Keep him tubed. Page ICU. Call me if. Stop. Aveline said sharply. Heads turned. He's not going to make it through the hour if we don't get atropine, oxime, and hemiperfusion now. Silence. Then Martin snapped. You're not on this case, Trask. Has been poisoned. A Martin blinked, incredulous. You're diagnosing battlefield nerve agents now. He's presenting with OPV-27 symptoms. Classic pattern. Seizures, bradycardia, stiff lungs. I've seen it before. Twice. And he's deteriorating exactly the same way. He needs counter-agent protocol immediately. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't move closer. But her posture said, I will not step back. Martin scoffed. This is not a field hospital, and you're not in uniform anymore. He turned away. One of the interns. Teller, young, awkward, smart when allowed to be, half raised a hand. Daka Trask, what, if it's OPV? Isn't that? I thought those agents didn't show on tests. Aveline nodded once. They don't. That's why the blood works clean. But if you do a full thickness dermal scan, check the sweat glands, you'll find metabolite traces. It accumulates subdermally. You have maybe 40 minutes to confirm. After that, it's full system collapse. She's guessing? Martin barked. I'm not. He turned slowly, as if daring her to say one more word. You don't have the authority to order that. Aveline didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her hand said it. Her breath said it. The nurse nearest her, older, sharp scar over her left wrist, caught her eye. Then, quietly, what do you want us to pull? Aveline barely whispered. Plasma sample. Skin strip ventral forearm. 10 micron. Martin snapped. Don't move. That's an unauthorized procedure. I'll have you written up. But no one was moving. Because above them, outside, the low tremble of something heavy was growing. The ER windows rattled. A clipboard fell. Everyone froze. A helicopter. Not the news chopper, not airlift medevac. A matte black military model, sleek, fast, too silent for comfort, hovered once, then touched down directly on the hospital's rooftop helipad. No call sign, no preclearance. Martin frowned. What the hell? And Aveline Trask stepped forward, not smiling, not triumphant, just resolute. Doctor, she said, her voice flat. You're going to want to look at the soldiers' tags again. His real ones. He didn't ask why. Because he could see it on her face now. Something in the way her jaw set. In the small, healed scar behind her left ear no one had ever asked about. In the way she moved without flinching from rank. The air shifted, and down the corridor, elevator doors opened. Men stepped out, uniformed, eyes scanning. Not for Martin, not for anyone else, only for her. And outside, Captain Elias Brenner's blood pressure dropped 5 points in under 60 seconds. The clock was running out. The hallway stretched long and fluorescent, lined with sterile beige walls and nurses frozen mid-motion. The men who exited the elevator weren't just military. They were covered. No insignia, no branch identifiers, every movement rehearsed. One carried a flat, reinforced black case. The lead man spoke without raising his voice. Dr. Aveline Trask. She didn't blink. Wes, come with us. No. She turned her body halfway back toward the trauma bay. He's crashing again. The man paused, then glanced at the soldier on the gurney. Captain Brenner. Aveline nodded once. He looked at the others. Activate protocol. Now. 2 broke off. One passed Martin without a word, stepping around the trauma team and pulling open the black case. Inside a thin, metallic device, field-grade portable spectrometer, and several sealed vials. Martin tried to protest. I don't know who you think. We're not here for you, Doctor, said the man, calm but absolute. Stand down. That was the moment something broke, not in the air, but in Martin himself. He stepped back just an inch, and it was enough. The trauma nurse with the wrist scar nodded, silently beginning to prep the skin site on Brenner's arm. Another nurse tapped into the IV line, running steady saline. Aveline handed the spectrometer, take the coordinates for the dermal strip, and still, she hadn't moved an inch closer to the soldier. She didn't need to. She already knew. 12 minutes later, a faint buzz confirmed the analysis elevated levels of OPV27 metabolites, deep tissue. Unmistakable. The senior tech from the black case team, call sign Loomis, handed Martin the printout. He looked at it, lips parted. Where the hell did you get this? He muttered. Aveline answered quietly. I saw this exact profile in 2011 at the border of coast. 3 contractors dead, 1 lived. All of them misdiagnosed until too late. And no one followed up. Aveline looked at him. He looked away. Captain Brenner's BP stabilized, but barely. Still too low, heart rate erratic. They had minutes, maybe less, before the toxin passed the saturation point and triggered permanent cardiac and neurological damage. The team moved fast now, administering atropine, then obidoxime. The smell of antiseptic overlaid the quiet whir of machines. But even with the counter-agent in play, his body wasn't responding fast enough. His kidneys are seizing, someone muttered. Aveline spoke before anyone else. Hemiperfusion. Loomis turned toward her. We can initiate it. But not here. Why not? Martin asked, his voice brittle. Because this hospital isn't equipped for that grade of filtration, said Loomis. And we need federal clearance to extract a patient under classified threat protocol. That's when the second silence fell, because no one had used the word classified out loud before, and now it echoed. Aveline stepped to the sink, scrubbed her hands again without being asked, and began prepping for transfer protocol. Loomis looked at her. You sure you're cleared for this? I was. My code expired 3 years ago. He studied her for a beat, then handed her a grey badge from his pocket. Renewed, just like that. Martin finally found words. What are you? Aveline looked down at the badge. She didn't smile. She didn't answer. But one of the nurses whispered, She's the one they call when the others don't make it. Transfer was prepped in under 10 minutes. The trauma team stepped back. The bed was loaded into a collapsible transport shell, airtight and sensor-lined. The black helicopter was already powering up on the roof. Aveline walked beside the shell as they moved. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. The wind on the rooftop was razor cold. The air stank of fuel and urgency. As they loaded the capsule into the open cargo bay, Loomis pulled her aside. You're coming. No, she said. I stay. We need continuity. You caught it. You've seen the metabolite pattern. I said no. He hesitated. You sure? I can't be in the same room with what's about to happen. Not again. Loomis nodded once, said nothing more. The helicopter lifted off 3 minutes later. Inside, Brenner was sedated, stable, but hovering at the line. Outside, Aveline watched the rotor spin into blur. Then she turned back toward the ER doors. Inside, Martin had cleared out. No apology, no confrontation, just absence. Only 2 interns remained, Teller and another, pale-faced and quiet. Teller approached slowly. I read your consult note yesterday, before it got auto-closed. I flagged it for escalation. I don't think anyone read it, though she looked at him. You did. He flushed. I didn't know what it meant. You knew it mattered. Teller shifted, then said softly, Why didn't you say more? I did, she said. You just weren't looking at me. At 3:42 p.m., Aveline finally returned to her station. Her hands trembled. She folded them tight beneath the desk. The ER hummed on around her, phones ringing, someone crying softly, the usual. Her badge still had no special clearance. Her file still flagged her as consult only. Nothing had changed, except everything had. The intern who brought her coffee now placed it down carefully, like he was setting it before someone dangerous, and in her inbox, 4 new unread messages, 1 from the director of toxicology, 1 from the Pentagon medical liaison, 2 marked CRCFIED. She didn't open them. Not yet. Outside, The sky was turning the color of quiet steel, and somewhere above, a black helicopter carved across it, carrying a man who would live. But only because the right woman refused to be silent. The next morning, the ER returned to rhythm, but not the same rhythm. There was a subtle hitch to it now, a pause before each decision, a glance, fleeting but weighted, whenever Aveline Trask walked by. She didn't speak more than she had to. Didn't change her posture, or the clipped way she signed off orders. But something had shifted. It started with how nurses paused before following Martin's instructions. A microsecond of delay, just long enough to register whether Dr. Trask was nearby. It showed in how security passed her desk twice that morning, not with suspicion, but respect. One guard even nodded. The shift was quiet, uneasy, and yet no one said a word to her, no apology, no acknowledgement. At 11:17 a.m., she received the third call from internal admin. Not Martin, not the board. The call came from Dr. Ezran Locker, chair of emergency medicine. Dr. Trask, came the voice. I'm scheduling a quality review regarding yesterday's incident. Not thank you. Not well done. Aveline kept her voice steady. Understood. It's protocol. You know that? Yes. And until that review concludes, your consult access will be limited to non-critical cases. Of course it would. She didn't argue. Just set the receiver down gently and stared at her screen. Outside the trauma bay, a janitor mopped a dark line of dried blood. That afternoon, a new consult came in, pediatric seizure, unexplained, low priority, possible epilepsy. But Aveline paused mid-scroll. The note was too clean, no tremor report, but slight pupil constriction, night sweats. The same phrasing, normal labs, psych suspected, 9-year-old girl, daughter of a defense contractor. She stood, then stopped, because her access had been downgraded. No authorization to sign off diagnostics. She could flag the case, but the flag would vanish like the last one. Like Brenner's. She sat back down and folded her hands, thumb to seam. At 4:03 p.m., Teller found her in the staff lounge. He looked like he'd been carrying something all day. He had. I went back into the system, he said, not meeting her eyes. The girl, room 4B. You saw it, right? Aveline said nothing. I tried to forward it to Locke, but it auto-bounced. Something about escalation clearance pending. He took a breath. I looked deeper, quietly. Her father works for Agaron Systems, defense side subcontractor, biochemical R&D. Aveline didn't move. Teller continued. There was a redacted report on OPV-27 in their archives, but I matched 3 words, sympathetic inhibition cascade, to a document you published under a different name. Her eyes flickered, just once. You're the one who wrote the Kandahar memo, aren't you? She looked at him. Why did you stop practicing full-time? He asked quietly. She stood, walked past him, and stopped at the window. Her voice, when it came, was level. The man who lived, one of the 3, survived because I broke protocol. I pulled classified chemical signatures from an unapproved archive and administered counter-agents without chain of command approval. He survived. I lost my clearance. They let me resign instead of filing. Teller swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell anyone? She turned. Because it would have buried the case. No one investigates a rogue. They erase them. He nodded. Slowly. Then, she's going to die, isn't she? Aveline didn't answer. But he already knew. At 6:02 p.m., the girl's BP dropped, respiration shallow, non-verbal. Martin called for neuro-consult. Trask was not included. She watched from the observation deck, high above, separated by glass and protocol. The girl's mother wept quietly in the hallway. The father, pale, silent, gripped his phone but never called anyone. Just stared through the glass at his daughter like he knew something and didn't know how to undo it. Aveline saw the signs. Same as before, same as always, but this time the toxin moved faster, smaller body, lower baseline tolerance, and no one on the team recognized it. At 6:45, Aveline tapped into the emergency requisition system. Her access failed. She tried the spectrometer log in used yesterday. It had been deactivated. She checked the field agent code Loomis gave her. Expired already. Of course it had. No authority. No voice. No move left to make. Unless she walked back into the main ER, not to the trauma bay, not to the child's room, to the nurse's station, the one with the woman who'd helped her during Brenner's code. The scar on her wrist. The sharp eyes. Her name was Calder. Aveline approached. Stopped. Waited for Calder to notice. The nurse looked up. They didn't speak. Aveline only raised one hand. Pinched her thumb and forefinger apart 1/2 inch. Mouthed one word. Same. Calder didn't move. Didn't ask for proof. She stood, took off her gloves, and said, without turning, I need 15 minutes off floor. Emergency call. Then she walked toward 4B. Aveline did not follow. Did not need to. She returned to her station. Typed one sentence into a secure window, open only for 2 minutes a day. She did not address it to anyone. Just submitted. Second OPV 27 exposure confirmed. Child. Agaran connection. Then she logged out and waited. By 7:10 p.m., Calder returned. Quiet. Grim. Kid's heart rate's holding, she said low. But we've got 30 minutes. Tops. Aveline didn't ask what she'd done. Didn't need to. And when the nurse reached into her pocket and placed a small grey comms badge on the desk beside her, Aveline simply stared at it. I found it in your locker, Calder said. Aveline didn't answer. The badge vibrated once, and a familiar voice clicked through. Degar. Trask. This is Loomis. We received your message. A pause. Then, extraction confirmed. Touchdown in 11. Aveline closed her eyes and exhaled, because this time the system was listening. But not because it wanted to. Because it had to, and because it couldn't afford not to. The girl was breathing, but only barely. By the time the helicopter blades cut through the sky a second time, her pupils had dilated unevenly. Reflexes failed. Her small body had begun its quiet revolt, one system at a time shutting itself down. The transfer team was smaller this time. Not federal, private. 3 personnel in deep grey tactical medwear unmarked. They moved with absolute precision, no wasted breath. One carried an updated mobile filter rig, smaller than the one used on Brenner, faster, but scarred down its side from field use. The kind not issued to civilian hospitals. They didn't speak to the other doctors, only to her. To Aveline. You ride with her, the lead said. Aveline hesitated. I don't have current clearance. The lead held up a scanner, already preloaded. It blinked green. You do now. Aveline looked down at the girl. Her name was Sierra Alstrom, and something inside her steadied. She nodded and climbed aboard. The ride was louder this time. Wind tore at the edges of the aircraft's seals. The medic across from her barely blinked, threading the girl's IV into the filter system with surgical care. But her oxygen was dropping, 80, 75, 72, as they gained altitude. Come on, the medic muttered. Come on, little bird. Aveline reached across. Switch to manual. The medic hesitated. I'm not asking, she said. The line was rerouted. Direct push delivery. Within 60 seconds, Sarah's saturation hit 79s and 83, then held at 86. No cheering, no triumph, just breath returning. For now. They landed at a facility no one named. It wasn't a hospital. It was colder than that. Tighter. Lights mounted flush into the ceilings. Security in every corner. Aveline stepped off the chopper and was met by two men in charcoal suits. The older one carried a dossier. Decker, Trask, welcome back. I didn't come back. You're here. That's enough. He handed her the folder. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't even labeled. Just inside photos. 3 dead, 1 survivor. Kandahar. The last page was newer. A blonde, blue-eyed, face swollen from intubation. Sarah. She's not military, Aveline said. No, the man agreed. But her father developed a trial compound, one component of OPV-27. Not a weapon. Not intentionally. No such thing. Aveline said. He didn't disagree. In the clean room, she worked beside 2 techs and one old doctor she hadn't seen in 13 years. Dr. Maritz. Dutch. Thin, with calloused hands and a gaze like a microscope. He didn't greet her. Just passed a sealed ampoule with a cracked corner. You said this wouldn't happen again, she said. He didn't look up. You said you'd never work again. I didn't, until you let a child breathe it. He didn't flinch. There was no deployment, he said flatly. Something else? Environmental. Possibly secondary exposure from prototype storage. They knew. They suspected. Did you? He paused. Does it matter? At 3:40 a.m., the girl was stabilized. For now. She wouldn't wake for hours, maybe longer, but her vitals were holding. And no one else had died. Not yet. Aveline walked out of the unit, removed her gloves, and scrubbed her hands until her skin stung. In the mirror above the sink, she saw it again. That faint mark behind her left ear. A healed incision. Scar from the extraction implant she'd removed herself after discharge. She thought it was over, that she could vanish into the margins. Be useful only when allowed. But Brenner had proved that wrong. And now Sarah had proven it louder. The system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. At dawn, Loomis found her outside. She sat on a concrete bench near a service dock, coat wrapped tight, fingers curled in the pockets. He stood a moment in silence before sitting beside her. They'll want a statement. Already gave one. I mean a formal one. Oversight, public accountability. They're considering internal disclosure to the VA, maybe even DHS. She didn't look at him. I'm not doing this again, Loomis. He nodded. They'll want to bring you back. I'm not going back. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object, set it on the bench. A silver cufflink, oval, worn smooth, marked only with the number 18. Aveline stared at it. You held onto it. I shouldn't have, Loomis said. It's a classified token. It was yours. Not anymore. He stood, said nothing more, and walked away. Later that morning, Aveline returned to the hospital. No fanfare, no notice. She passed through the lobby like a shadow. No one looked up. Her locker hadn't been touched. Inside was her spare scrub top, neatly folded. She ran a thumb across the stitched seam. The fabric was fraying. Like everything else, she changed. Tied her hair back. Looked at herself in the mirror. Nothing special. Just a woman with tired eyes and a badge clipped to a plain scrub collar. But inside, the quiet fire had returned. Not anger, not pride. Just knowing that the system's silence was not her silence, and that next time, if there was a next time, she would speak sooner, not for their permission, but because it was right. At 9:08 a.m., Dr. Martin passed her in the hallway. He didn't speak. But this time, he didn't sneer either. Just kept walking. Behind him, Teller approached with a chart. "New case?" he said. "Possible hepatic tox." He hesitated. Then, "Want to take it?" Aveline looked at the file and nodded. "Let's start with the dermal markers," she said. "And get me the full occupational history." She didn't smile, didn't need to. The work would speak, and this time they would listen, or they would answer for not listening, because a system doesn't collapse all at once. It fractures, quietly, inevitably, and then the roof gives way. She had 27 hours before the next report reached Washington. That was the window. 27 hours of silence. 27 hours of institutional delay, of quietly redacted notes and anonymous briefings, while Aveline Trask watched from a hospital floor no longer hers. But the moment didn't come in a meeting. It came in a hallway. It was just past noon. Sarah Ulstrom had survived the night. She was off sedation now, eyes open, lucid enough to cry softly for her mother. Aveline stood behind the glass, saying nothing. Her name wasn't on the log. No one thanked her. No one even acknowledged she'd been on the transport team. But the mother looked up once, eyes red, mouth trembling, and held Aveline's gaze for 3 full seconds. A nod, small, unmistakable, and that was the only thank you she would ever need. At 1:16 p.m. her badge access was revoked. No warning, just a dull beep when she tried to retrieve patient files. Locked out of the system. She expected it. She sat in the stairwell instead. 3rd floor landing. Same cracked tile she'd stared at the night she'd signed her resignation letter 2 years ago. A letter she never sent. Loomis had intercepted it, filed something else in its place. She never asked what. The stairwell door opened. Dr. Ezran Locke entered. Grey suit, no coat, eyes tired. He didn't sit, didn't offer apology. Instead, "They're sending down federal auditors." Aveline didn't respond. "They're reopening the Kandahar file," he said. Unusual. That was sealed 13 years ago. Still, she said nothing. Locke stared down at the steps. "You know what they'll ask?" "Yes." "They'll say you circumvented protocol." "I did." "They'll say you used classified clearance improperly." "I did that." A long pause. "And if they ask whether you administered a neurotoxic protocol without chain of command approval?" Aveline looked at him. Steady. Cold. Another pause. Then Locke exhaled and sat down beside her. Slowly, he said, "Quieter now. We should have listened." "That won't change anything." "No," he said. "But I'll say it anyway." He reached into his coat and handed her a folded envelope. "I'm not allowed to send this," he said. "Not officially." Inside a printout. Anonymous survey responses from the ER team. Dozens. Most short. All from the last 72 hours. One line repeated 3 times. Dr. Trask hadn't spoken. That child would be dead. Aveline closed the envelope. Did not speak. At 3:50 p.m. the call came. Not to her. To the hospital. A federal agent, unannounced, arrived at the loading dock in a black sedan. No badge shown. Just a sealed document handed to administration. At 4:07 p.m., Dr. Martin was relieved of duty pending investigation. No scene. No raised voices. Just a slow, deliberate exit from the building under escort. He didn't look at anyone. Especially not her. By evening, the story had already begun to turn. Not publicly. Not yet. But the private whispers had changed key. Aveline wasn't a ghost anymore. She wasn't the quiet one. No, she was the doctor who caught it. The one the agents spoke to in private. The one whose file they pulled from storage and scanned line by line. And every time she passed through a corridor, the silence that followed was different. Less condescension, more calculation. But she didn't want their fear. She wanted their accuracy. At 6:22 p.m., the moment arrived. Aveline stood alone at the med station, chart in hand, when a new alert buzzed through the system. It was flagged LEVL6, URGentPOLOGELS. She tapped it open. The message wasn't addressed to her. It was a general circulation notice. But the sender was clear: U.S. Army Medical Command. The content: a newly recognized subset of OPV-27 exposure risks in civilian populations, citing her original fieldwork, verbatim. With one sentence highlighted at the end: protocol adjustment recommended based on diagnostic pattern observed by Dr. Aveline Trask. Her name, in print, no footnote, no asterisk, just truth. She sat down for the first time all day, not in victory, not in relief, just breath. And when the lights dimmed overhead for evening power cycle, she didn't move. Let the moment settle, because this was the shift, not a climax of applause, not vindication in headlines, but the silent tilt of power. Authority collapsing under its own refusal to listen. Not because she forced it, because it forced itself. That night, Loomis called once. Didn't leave a message, didn't need to. She let it ring, then silenced her phone. Just before midnight, she walked the empty corridor past pediatric recovery one last time. Sarah slept, curled sideways, IV hanging loose in the crook of her arm. A nurse adjusted the blanket without seeing Aveline. She turned, headed toward the elevator, not looking back, because the right things don't always end with thanks. Sometimes they end with knowing you acted when no one else would, even when it cost you everything. Especially then. 3 days later, it was Martin's name on the staff absence board. No announcement, no details. Just a red slash next to his assigned trauma shifts and a replacement name typed below it in smaller font. No one asked where he'd gone. No one needed to. The hospital didn't release a statement. The board avoided comment, but the silence around him grew larger than any press release. And in its vacuum, the staff did something rare. They adjusted themselves, without being told. By the following Monday, Aveline's consult access was quietly reinstated. No call, no meeting, just a soft beep when her badge opened the diagnostics panel again. She tested it 3 times. It worked. Her name, long dormant, had returned to internal logs, first initials only, no formal announcement. But Teller noticed. So did Calder. So did the overnight pharmacist, who handed her a stack of records and said, "Thought you might want these," before disappearing into the stairwell. No congratulations, just utility, which was all she'd ever wanted. On Wednesday, a new case came in. Male, civilian, unresponsive. Symptoms mirrored OPV, but the vitals were wrong, too slow an onset. She noted the details, filed them, and flagged the record under a new protocol code. This time, the flag held. It didn't disappear. It was routed, reviewed, escalated, and 12 hours later, the Toxicology Board formally approved a screening expansion to include OPV variants in the flagged pattern set. No mention of her name, but she saw it. In the code, TRASC-7R, a technician with nothing to prove, had embedded her initials into the protocol prefix. Not loudly, just enough. At 2:06 p.m. that same day, Loomis called again. She picked up. "Thought you were done," he said. "I am." He paused. "Then why are you still running the floor?" "Because the roof still hasn't collapsed." A beat. "You want it to." She stared out the window of the staff lounge, watched a janitor mop around a dropped stethoscope. "No," she said. I just want the ones who caused it to stand under it for once." Loomis didn't answer right away. Then, "That's not justice." "No," she said. "It's balance." On Thursday, the black helicopter returned. No sirens, no disruption. It landed on the roof, unloaded a small sealed case, and lifted off again in under 5 minutes. The case was delivered to pathology under lockdown. Inside, updated antitoxin serum, adapted from Syrah's response profile. It bore no label, no agency seal. Just a barcode and a strip of white tape across the top. Written in faint, slanted handwriting, for the quiet doctor. "You were right." Aveline never asked who sent it. She didn't need to. She spent that night in the old call room, head against the wall, eyes closed. The hospital was quieter now. The chaos hadn't ended. It never would. But something had shifted in how people spoke to each other. Less defensiveness, more caution, more listening. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt tired. But underneath it, deep, almost unnoticeable, was a different kind of weight. Not grief, not rage, just gravity. The kind that held things together when institutions failed. The kind that stayed long after headlines faded. The next morning, the new department head made rounds. Not Locke. Not Martin. A woman named Dr. Irina Nix, flown in from D.C. tall, dark blazer, reading glasses clipped to her collar. She didn't say much. But she watched. And when she reached Aveline at the end of the west hallway, she extended her hand. "I've read your field notes," she said. "I didn't send them. I know. That's why I read them." No more was said, but 2 hours later, Aveline's file was updated with a single new line: status, active. Clearance, conditional reinstatement. There was no ceremony, no applause, no headline. But everyone who mattered saw the shift. The nurses started looping her in before scans were requested. Interns came with questions instead of defensiveness. And the trauma bay never questioned her presence again. She still signed consults with her first initial only. Still tied her hair the same way. Still rubbed her thumb over the scrub seam out of habit. But now, every time she did, there was space around her. Not power, not fame. Just earned respect, late, quiet, and enough. That night, Teller knocked once before stepping into the staff lounge, held a printout in one hand. "CDC just released a bulletin," he said. "Civilian hospitals flagged for OPV exposure protocols. Mandatory compliance." He set the printout down, stared at it. "You did that." Aveline looked at the paper, at the stamped seal, and finally spoke. "No," she said. "The system did it to itself." Teller tilted his head. "But only because you made it impossible not to." She didn't reply. Didn't have to. Because some truths, once seen, can't be unseen, and some collapses don't come with smoke and ruin. They come with silence, paper trails, a tilt in posture, and a final public surrender of authority, not to a fight, not to a speech, but to a fact that would not go away. 3 weeks later, the girl was discharged. Sarah Alstrom walked with a slight limp, one hand trailing a portable oxygen feed, but her eyes were clear, alert, alive. Her mother signed the papers in silence. Her father never came inside. He waited by the curb, engine running, the window down just enough for Aveline to see his face. She didn't approach, didn't wave, but he looked at her, held it, and nodded. Not in gratitude, not in guilt, just recognition. Then he drove away. Aveline remained standing at the hospital doors long after they were gone. The January air bit through her scrub jacket. Inside, the waiting room bustled, people arguing with reception, nurses moving fast, volunteers restocking carts. No one stopped. No one looked. the way she preferred it. She walked back through the ER, quiet footsteps swallowed by tile and time. Every machine beeped the same. Every patient chart held the same weight. But something inside her had gone still, not numb, not cold, braced for whatever came next. In her locker was a letter, unmarked envelope, inside a single sheet, printed words. No sender. It read, "You will not be thanked for this. You will not be promoted. You will not be remembered. But the systems you cracked open will not close again. Because now too many hands know how to reach inside." There was no signature, but the paper smelled faintly of antiseptic and jet fuel. She folded it once, slipped it into her coat pocket, and never spoke of it again. The investigation into Martin was quietly closed. No charges, no statement. He would not return. Official cause: administrative misconduct during classified protocol conflict. No one used the word mistake. No one needed to. Everyone who worked that floor remembered the silence that followed his final decision. It spoke louder than any reprimand. Dr. Irina Nix remained in oversight for 21 days. On her last morning, she found Aveline outside radiology. Protocol TRS-K27R has been approved as baseline diagnostic, she said, without preamble. "I saw," Aveline replied. Nix nodded. "We'll be rolling it out to 5 more hospitals." A beat. Then, "You could lead the training." "No. You'd be good at it." "That's not the point." Nix studied her, then handed her a keycard. "Use it when you're ready," she said. Aveline accepted it, didn't promise anything. Nix smiled faintly, then walked away. At dusk, Aveline walked the perimeter of the hospital roof. The wind there was colder, sharper than she remembered. You could see the entire city, its arteries of red tail lights, its sprawl of glass and motion. From here, every part of it looked controlled. But she knew better. Systems don't run on order. They run on denial. On the illusion that nothing breaks if no one speaks, until someone does. And then it all changes, not with fanfare, but with fracture. She took the silver cufflink from her pocket, the one Loomis left. It had no purpose now, no code, no clearance. Just a mark of something she once was. She placed it on the edge of the rooftop railing, let it sit there. Then walked away. Back inside, passed her a chart without a word. Aveline read the symptoms. Brief headache, low-grade tremor, normal labs. But the pupil response? Just slightly. She looked up, and Calder had already nodded. "I'll pull dermals," she said, just in case. Aveline didn't respond, just signed the chart. Because that's what mattered now. Not her. Not titles, just the work. At the right moment. Before it's too late. That night, she passed Teller on her way out. He was mid-sentence, talking to a new intern, gesturing with a pen. The intern was arguing politely, trying to push back. Aveline paused, listened. Teller said, "Look again. Just because the labs are clean doesn't mean she's wrong." The intern frowned, but there's no sign of exposure. Not the usual signs. Teller interrupted. There's more than one kind of evidence. The intern hesitated, then nodded. Aveline moved on, down the corridor, toward the doors. Outside, she paused under the awning. Streetlights flickered in the fog. She breathed once, twice, then walked toward her car. No music, no thoughts. Just the quiet knowing the system hadn't given her justice. It never would. But it had given her back the one thing she'd lost in that field hospital 13 years ago. The ability to speak and be heard. That was enough. That was everything. Some truths do not explode, they erode. And when they surface, the powerful do not fall in battle. They dissolve, under the weight of their own refusal to listen. That is how the real reckoning comes. Not with rage, but with silence. Thank you for listening. To those who endure in silence, who speak when it costs them everything, you are never alone, and you are never forgotten.